I've been collecting plants for over 10 years now. I've learned a lot along the way. These are the top things that I wish I knew when I was starting out. So hopefully you don't have to learn the hard way like I did. Number one, light is the absolutely number one most important thing, period. If you are not giving your plants enough light, nothing else matters. It's not your fertilizer, it's not your watering. You need to give your plants enough light. Just like stop, I'm begging you, stop trying to move them as far away from a window as possible without them dying. Like I've been there, I've tried that, and every time I move my plants farther away from the light source, they always do worse. And I'm not just talking about succulents here. I'm talking about your plants that are labeled low light or bright indirect light. In most cases, they're telling you the minimum amount of light the plant can tolerate in order to survive. That does not mean thrive. It's almost impossible to give a house plant too much light when you're using a natural light source indoors. The only time you have to worry about burning your plants is if you're sticking them outside in the full sun or when you get into using grow lights. But most people are just using the sun. So please put your plants as close to the window as you can. Put them in your sunniest, brightest window, and I promise you, your plants will thank you. Watering will get easier. You don't have to worry about overwatering your plants as much when they're getting enough light. They'll just be happier. You'll see the leaves getting bigger. You'll see more growth. I always recommend getting a light meter if you can. You can even use an app on your phone for this, and that will tell you exactly how much light your plants are getting. But if you want a simple gauge to start, direct sun or high light is going to be anywhere you see like harsh shadows. So you can kind of see that even around me. I'm getting like lots of light and it's casting shadows. If you can give your plants at least a couple hours of that kind of light every day, they will thank you for it. And as you move away from a window, the light is going to get exponentially less intense. So the sweet spot is like 1 to maybe 4 feet away max. Any further, the light is going to be really, really low and you're going to start having problems. This is true of even plants that say bright indirect light or low light. Just try it. I promise they will do better if you put them in a sunny spot. And that brings me to my next thing that I wish I knew. This one might be a little controversial, but houseplants are not decor. If I have to hear one more interior designer say to brighten up a dark corner with a houseplant,
what I do think you can do to warm it up is, girl, move all them plants over there. I love that she has the flowers in the vase. Plants are really good, especially in a windowless room.
Plants are really good, especially in a windowless room.
Because natural light can bring in some life, some sun, some air. But if you don't have that, plants can help bring in some of that energy.
I'm gonna explode. What makes you think that your plant wants to live in that dark corner? Like, these are living things that need sunlight to produce food. And I'm not saying that plants can't make a space look better or that there's no way to aesthetically display plants and give them enough light. But it can't be an afterthought. You can't treat them the same way you do furniture. I mean, if you want to treat them like a vase of flowers, maybe, where you just accept that they only have a limited lifespan and you're going to have to replace them after a while, then go ahead and put them wherever you want. But I think most of us want them to be incorporated into our homes. And that takes a little bit more effort and thought. You really have to think about the plant's needs first. So that might mean getting grow lights. It might mean shifting your furniture around so that the plants get the sunny spot by the window instead of that nice cozy chair. But trust me, I've tried this so many times to make my plants fit around my decor and treat them as a decor item, and they always end up suffering. Even when I think like, oh yeah, like this shelf, they'd get enough light, but it's like in a lonely little corner or something, then I forget to water it. So it ends up dying anyways. So for me especially, plants are just not decor. There are plenty of other little knickknacks you can get if you want decor. Dried flowers, great, love them. Houseplant, not so much. Number 3, maybe related, is that terrariums are a scam. Just don't waste your time with terrariums. They promise this beautiful, cute little glass container filled with plants, perfect little environment. You don't have to do any maintenance because it's closed and it just like takes care of itself, blah, 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 blah. They look good when you first make them. And trust me, like I've put in the drainage layer, I've done like all the things that you're supposed to do, and they just end up looking bad. Like they end up growing algae.
This is what happens to your terrariums if you don't open them or do any maintenance on them for, a few weeks. Well, it's probably longer than that.
I think to have them look nice, you need to do a fair amount of maintenance. And I mean, that kind of defeats the whole point of something that's low maintenance if you're constantly having to like clean the glass and mist it and maintain the moisture levels, like maintaining the balance of airflow so stuff doesn't rot, but also moisture so your plants don't dry out. Like that's so difficult. I also see a lot of people putting in plants that are too big for a terrarium, and it looks fine when you plant it, but then very quickly they outgrow the space, or you have one that just takes over. It's hard to find the right plants to put in a terrarium that are going to thrive. So I would never recommend them. I used to think they were great. I like the concept, I like the idea, but especially as a beginner, I would just like totally avoid them. Number 4, some plants are just not meant to live. It's not your fault. They just set you up for failure. Things like maidenhair ferns, air plants, lithops, or living stones, Venus flytraps. All of these insanely difficult to keep alive and keep looking good. Air plants, they rot super easily, even if you do everything right, you turn them upside down. Maidenhair ferns just love to get burned to a crisp. They dry out if you look at them the wrong way. Lithops or living stones often come overwatered when you get them. They have a very specific life cycle. I can't remember it, even though I've been trying to grow them for like multiple years. And even if you do everything right, you're probably still gonna lose a few every year. At least that's what happens to me. And Venus flytraps require a dormancy period that a lot of people don't tell you. If you have more plants to add to this list, please let me know in the comments. But garden centers will continue to sell you these plants, and people will continue to buy them because they look nice, but they're totally setting you up for failure. So just skip it. Just stick to your easy plants, your philodendrons, your monsteras, your Hoyas. Generally, you can't go wrong with those. Caletheas, maybe Caletheas, but even then, like I wouldn't push it. But trust me, if you've ever purchased those, if you've ever been victimized by a maidenhair fern or a Venus flytrap, it's not you, I promise. It is the plant. Number 5, I wish I had known about self-watering pots earlier. If you don't want to worry about overwatering your plants, get self-watering pots. They make your life so much easier. I have lost way less plants once I started using them. Hoyas, anthuriums, philodendrons, monsteras. That's basically how I grow all of my plants. And if you're a beginner, you might be sitting there thinking, well, how does that work when different plants have different watering needs? They don't really though. Like they really don't. We overthink it a lot, but actually all your plants, with the exception of maybe succulents, need the same thing. They need moisture. They don't like it when their roots get absolutely bone dry, but they also need airflow and oxygen. That's why overwatering is bad, because it basically removes the oxygen that your plants need. That's it. All plants just need to live somewhere between 100% crispy dry and swimming in water. Most of them are pretty tolerant within that range, and a self-watering pot will just keep it nicely in that range. And if you don't want to invest in self-watering pots, you still don't need to overthink it. One of the best tools you can use to see if your plants need water is just your fingers. Just like feel the top of the pot. If it's still wet on top, don't water. If you dig a little bit down and it's still wet or kind of moist feeling, don't water. If you dig down like a couple centimeters into the pot and it feels completely dry, it means the top layer has dried out, probably still has some moisture at the bottom, but it's probably a good time to water. And that will work for like 95% of your plants. Succulents are the only ones really where you want to let them get bone dry before you water them again. And that's it. Simple. It's really not as complicated as a lot of people make it out to be. Number 6, brown tips, yellowing leaves at the bottom of your plant. All of these are completely normal. I can't tell you how many friends I've had come to me and be like, oh, is my plant dying? And it's like a very old leaf just turning brown and falling off. Houseplant Journal has many really good resources on this. He's talked about this a lot, but that is just part of the normal life cycle for your plants, is for the bottom leaves to eventually pass their nutrients on to the newer growth and to fall off now that they've completed their life cycle. It's totally normal. It's nothing that you've done. Some plants tend to lose more of those bottom leaves than others, but it is a natural process. Same with browning tips. It can happen very easily if plants get a little bit too dry, or maybe they get a little bit too much sun, or the humidity is a little bit lower than what they'd like, but it doesn't actually affect the plant. It's just cosmetic. You can cut the tips off if they really bother you. Unless your plant is losing like 3 or 4 leaves at a time, or the whole thing is going crispy, you really have nothing to worry about. Just take the dead leaves off and move on with your life. Number 7, are we at number 7? Don't overthink fertilizer. There's tons of products out there, tons of different ratios. Just use what you have. Using any fertilizer is better than using no fertilizer. Even if it's, a orchid fertilizer, you can use it on your other house plants. They will just not use the components that they don't need. The best thing you can do is just to use a week dose. So whatever the smallest recommended amount is on the container, use that with your watering, just like regularly every time you water. Don't overthink it. A friend explained it to me once that it's like our plants are snackers. They don't want like a big meal of fertilizer. They just want like a little bit constantly. If you give them that, honestly, like the ratios are not that important. Just use what you have. Like you might notice a marginal difference using one thing or the other. And if you want to experiment as you get more experience, great. But especially when you're just starting out, fertilizer is not the thing that is going to make the difference between your plants thriving or not. You probably, if you have a plant that's struggling, need to address either the light thing or the watering thing first, then worry about your fertilizer. Number 8, another thing you're probably overthinking is repotting. Repotting is like almost irrelevant. Maybe this is controversial, but it's almost irrelevant. I have plants that I have kept in the original nursery pots for years, and they are thriving and they are happy, and I have done nothing to them. If your plant is struggling, you might want to repot it just to check and see how the roots are, if the roots are all rotten or like what's the deal. Repotting could just be putting the same plant into that same pot. And you can come at me, but pot size is really not that big of a deal. If you have a huge pot for a tiny root ball, you may be more likely to overwater just because that substrate is going to hold moisture for longer. But as long as you are aware of that and you're still doing the substrate test that we talked about earlier, you'll be fine. The plant will be fine. The plant will adapt. These plants don't live in pots in the wild, but they can adapt to a lot of different conditions. Same with a plant that's in a pot that is too small. 90% of my Hoyas are in pots that are too small. And you know what? They're doing just fine. That's kind of like a thing with bonsai. Like they actually do that on purpose, planting them in a pot that's too small and the plant adapts. So the worst thing you can do is just slow the growth. But it's really not a big deal. And if you put it in a pot that's too big too early, not a big deal. It will adapt. Just do the same thing, make sure the substrate's drying out in between, and you will be fine. It will be okay, I promise. Number 9, don't overthink your substrate. This goes right along with repotting. I grow 90% of my plants in the same thing, which is an inorganic mixture from Crystal Star Nursery. People get very much into the nitty-gritty of, what different additives and stuff to put in your substrate. And you're welcome to experiment that as you get experience. But when you start out, just find one thing that works for you. What I usually recommend for beginners who don't want to get fancy is just houseplant soil with a little bit extra perlite added to it. So let's say 2 parts houseplant soil to 1 part perlite. Those things are easy. You can get them at any garden center, and that will satisfy what the roots of your plant want, which is consistent access to moisture and airflow. That's it. That's what they want. The peat or cocoa part of the houseplant mix is going to provide that moisture, and the perlite is going to provide aeration. The more perlite you add, the more aeration you're going to have, the harder it is to overwater your plants. But even if you don't add extra perlite, you just follow the steps we did before. Check and make sure the substrate is dried out before watering, and then it doesn't actually matter what substrate you use. The only time it matters, I'd say if you are going to use a self-watering pot, then use an inorganic substrate. So that's something like Pon or Leca or the Mineral Magic Mix that I like to use. And that's only because organic components can start to deteriorate faster in a consistently moist environment, which can lead to other problems. I just know there's a lot of people out there trying to sell you like different mixes, an aroid mix, anthurium mix, a Hoya mix, and it's great to experiment with these things and find what works for you, but it can be overwhelming. Just stick with something simple. Stick with what you have when you're starting. It's probably not the substrate that's causing your plants to struggle. It's probably the amount of light it's getting and how you're watering it. Let the substrate get mostly dry before you water it, and then it does not matter what substrate you use. Number 10, one of the most important things I would recommend, something that I wish I knew when I was starting, is to learn to identify pests early. So I'm going to give you a little crash course in what to look for. If it is white and fuzzy, it's probably mealybugs. These tend to show up on Hoyas and succulents especially. If you see white fuzzies on the roots, then that's either root aphids or root mealybugs. They're very similar to the ones on the leaves, except they live on the roots. If you see speckles on your plants and you see webbing, this is spider mites. Spider mites can either be like yellow or blackish looking, or there's also red spider mites, but they all leave a similar pin pricky looking pattern on your plants. They tend to affect Thinner leaf plants, alocasias especially, they really like. Flat mites tend to affect Hoyas and sometimes Phalaenopsis orchids. These can also leave little pinprick marks, but they don't create any webbing. They are much smaller than spider mites, but you can see them if you look really, really close. They just look like tiny little red specks. On Hoyas, some of the other symptoms you'll see are really woody stems and veins on your Hoyas, like woody looking scarring on the backs of the leaves. And often the growth points will just die, and it seems to be for no reason. So those are flat mites. Thrips, this is a big one. There's two types we're going to talk about. There's a black thrips that I am going to assume is greenhouse thrips, even there's a few different ones, but for our purposes, they're all the same. They leave almost like a scratchy looking pattern on your leaves. It's not like consistent. The larvae are clear and they leave these distinct black spots in the scratchy areas that are the poops of the larvae. The adults are long and skinny and black. There's another type of thrips called Western flower thrips. The shape is very similar to the black thrips, but instead of being black, they're more of a yellowy, tanny color. And these larvae do not leave those black poops behind. However, they still leave the same scratchy pattern, and the larvae look like little worms crawling on your plants. They're like a yellowy tan color as well. Last one is scale. Scale almost doesn't look like an insect. It can look like just a scab on your plants, but if you squish it and it comes off, or you like pick it and it comes off, then it's probably scale. Now, this is not to scare you. This is so that you can identify them early, because any of these pests are way easier to treat when there's only a few of them. So if you can identify them before they affect your whole collection, it's so much better. And there are slightly different things that you can do for these pests, but just as a general thing that works more or less for everything, what I recommend if you notice pests is to, first of all, rinse everything with water, spray it with water, try and physically remove as many of the pests as you can. I use a combination of horticultural oil, which is just mineral oil diluted at, I think, 10 milliliters per liter, along with some insecticidal soap. You could also use like a Dr. Bronner's Castile soap, along with an insecticidal soap, and just spray the whole plant with that mixture. If it's root mealybugs, you can treat it the same way. Rinse and get as much physically off as you can, spray and put into a new pot. Scale are a little bit harder to get off. You might have to work a little harder to like physically remove them. Like maybe you have to use a piece of tape or something, or a Q-tip with some rubbing alcohol. I personally just usually use my fingernails, even though it's kind of gross, but it's still essentially the same treatment. Get as much off physically as you can, and then spray with something gentle, like an insecticidal soap, that will basically smother anything that you left behind. Now, the key, no matter what pest it is, the key is to repeat this process frequently. All these pests have a life cycle, and you're never going to get all of the eggs and all of the babies on the first go. So you have to keep repeating this at least once a week, preferably a couple of times a week, until you don't see any more pests coming back. Again, you don't need to panic. You don't need to overthink it. But that was definitely something that I wish I had known when I was starting, is what to actually look for. So those are my top tips that I wish I had known when I was starting out. Please leave yours below, or let me know if I'm way off base with some of these. It is hard sometimes when you've been doing things a certain way for so long, you forget how it used to be. But I feel like I have enough friends who come and ask me questions about plants and stuff that I kind of see the same things over and over again. So let me know. Let me know what you think, and let me know what you wish you had known when you were starting out. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.